Let's kick things off with a simple question. Why does your brain, this incredibly powerful machine, just love to take the easy way out? Well, today we're going to explore that fundamental truth about how we think. We're diving deep into the psychology behind our mental shortcuts.
Come on, you know you have. We've all been there. You're staring at a huge wall of options and you just grab the one you recognize. You didn't do a deep analysis, you took a shortcut. And here's the thing, that isn't you being lazy, that's your brain working exactly as it was designed to. And this brings us to this amazing concept in psychology, the cognitive miser. The analogy is just perfect. Think about it. Just like a financial miser hoards every last penny, your brain tries to hoard its energy. Deep thinking is hard work, and your mind is constantly and automatically looking for ways to cut those cognitive costs.
This whole idea was really put on the map by psychologists Susan Fiske and Shelley Taylor way back in 1984. Their statement is so simple, but it's incredibly profound. It's not about how smart you are, it's about capacity. There's just way too much information flying at us all the time to possibly process all of it.
Now, to really get why this cognitive miser idea was such a game changer, we have to look at the theory it completely replaced. See, before we saw ourselves as misers, we saw ourselves as these super rational, logical thinkers, almost like scientists.
Yeah, this was the naive scientist model, first proposed by Fritz Heider back in 1958. It basically imagined us as these dispassionate beings, carefully gathering data and testing hypotheses before making any decision, whether it was a huge life choice or just what to have for lunch.
So the shift is just massive, right? We went from seeing the human mind as this careful scientist, always prioritizing accuracy through a ton of effort, to seeing it as a miser, prioritizing ease through efficiency. It's a fundamental change from a quest for objective truth to just a hunt for the path of least resistance.
All right, so if we are all cognitive misers, what tools do we actually use to save all this mental energy? Well, it turns out our brains have a standard, very well-used toolkit for cutting all those corners.
And these tools are called heuristics. You can just think of them as mental rules of thumb. They're incredibly useful because they get us to a good enough answer really, really fast. But, and this is a big but, there's a trade-off. They can sometimes lead us way, way off course.
Okay, so a key tool in this toolkit is the availability heuristic. This one is a really big deal. Our brains have this little quirk. If we can think of an example of something easily, we just automatically assume it must be super common or more likely to happen.
And here's the perfect classic example. Plane crashes are dramatic, right? They're all over the media and the images just stick in our minds. They are highly available to us mentally. But car accidents, even though they are statistically way more dangerous, are so common they barely even register. So our assessment of risk gets all skewed, not by the actual data, but by how easily we can recall a dramatic story.
And then we've got another powerful tool called the anchoring heuristic. This is our tendency to get totally latched onto the very first piece of information we hear. That first number or fact becomes an anchor that pretty much holds all our later thinking close to it.
You see this happen constantly in negotiations. The sticker price on a car? That's the anchor. Even if you negotiate way down from there, that initial number subconsciously frames your entire perception of what a good deal even is. It's an incredibly powerful technique that marketers and negotiators use against us all the time.
So obviously, these shortcuts are way more than just interesting mental quirks. They have massive, real-world consequences. I mean, they shape everything from our personal decisions to the very structure of our society.
Let's just take politics for a second. Research shows a lot of us vote as cognitive misers. I mean, you're faced with a complex election, and it would take an enormous amount of effort to research every single candidate's policies. So instead, a voter might use a simple heuristic. Maybe they vote based on party affiliation, or even just a gut feeling about a candidate's personality. This shortcut leads to a quick decision, sure, but it's one based on simple cues rather than complex substance. And when that happens on a massive scale, it fundamentally shapes our political landscapes.
And you know what? This pattern just repeats itself everywhere. In the media, it means we rely on headlines and the way a story is framed instead of doing a deep analysis. In risk assessment, it's why we fear the rare dramatic dangers over the common mundane ones. And in economics, it shapes our assumptions in every single negotiation we enter. These aren't just quirks, they're like the invisible architecture of our social world.
But hold on, The story doesn't end there with us just being passive, lazy thinkers. The theory has evolved because psychologists realized something really important was missing from that original picture.
And that missing element? It was motivation. See, sometimes a decision is just too important to use a shortcut. When the stakes are really high, or we're particularly invested in getting something right, we're actually willing to spend that precious mental energy.
And this leads us to the more modern view, the motivated tactician. This theory suggests we're much more flexible. We basically have both the miser's shortcuts and the scientist's lab coat hanging in our mental closet, and we strategically choose which one to put on based on our goals in that moment.
And really, that's the whole journey of this idea. We went from believing we were always rational scientists to realizing we were often efficient misers to our current understanding that we're actually strategic tacticians, choosing our approach based on what matters most to us.
This quote from the psychologist Eric Kroglansky just sums it up perfectly. We're not hardwired to be one or the other. We have multiple strategies at our disposal, and we deploy them based on whatever we need in that moment.
And all of this leaves us with a final, really powerful question for you. Now that you know your brain's default setting is to be a miser, to conserve energy, you now have the power to be more mindful about it. The next time you face a big, complex decision, you can consciously ask yourself, is this a moment for a shortcut? Or is this a moment to put on the lab coat and really spend the energy to think like a scientist? The choice really is yours.